Hello and welcome to Dear SQL DBA, a podcast, YouTube show, and now a Twitch stream for database developers and database administrators. I am Kendra Little from Redgate Software and from SQL Workbooks. And today I wanted to chat about what it is that evangelists do. My job at Redgate my job title is that I'm an evangelist. And I've gotten the question from multiple folks, including people at Passport Control, as to what exactly is it that you do as an evangelist? Because it really isn't always obvious. And I think it's changing as well. I think the role of evangelists who've been around in software companies for a while, I think it really is evolving. I first heard of this job title way back when I first was working at Microsoft, and I think I was still a contractor there. I got a job at Microsoft as a contractor and was very excited to be working at Microsoft, and it was an amazing job. I worked a lot and I learned a ton. Of course, I was an hourly employee, so working a lot was actually to my benefit. I eventually did become a full-time employee at Microsoft and kept learning more and more there as well, and it was great. But back, I think I was still a contractor. The first encounter I had with an evangelist was we were in these buildings where everyone was in offices. There were no cube farms at all. Everybody was in offices. And lots of us did share offices with other people, which, you know, my office mates were always really good people to work with. It was nice actually to share an office because you could, learn a lot from the people you were working with who were often on your team or on a related team. So you could figure out lots of stuff about what it was like to support different products. But our offices weren't all together for the team. So you'd have neighbors who worked in completely different parts of the organization. And one of the neighbors, there's a little nameplate that mentioned this person was an evangelist, and I don't even know what team this person was on. It was a man, and the only things I knew about this evangelist were their door to their office was usually shut, and they were often yelling angrily into a telephone. And I was just like, I don't know exactly what this job is, but it seems to be, I don't know if the job is for really angry people or if this just happens to be a really angry person, but there seems to be a lot of yelling involved. And to this day, I'm actually really surprised by that. And I'm like, I actually even cannot kind of reconcile what all of this angry yelling had to do with this person's job. And my job as an evangelist, there is not a lot of yelling and there is not a lot of anger. And I actually don't even use the phone that much. So everything is really different from that first encounter with an evangelist. But it did kind of teach me that different evangelists may have very different jobs, because that is not at all the job that I'm in. Now, these days, a lot of people who do the job of what was formerly known as evangelist actually are changing their job title, because the word evangelist, it has religious overtones, and to many people I think it brings up the Crusades and it brings up violence. I don't know if that's related to the angry person in their office screaming into the phone or not, but at Microsoft, for example, I do know that many evangelists now have the job title developer advocate. Now, I appreciate why the name might change, but I don't know if developer advocate is the perfect name either. Like when I think of an advocate, it kind of brings up to me like someone you might get if you were in a difficult legal proceeding, or if you were in a tough healthcare situation and you needed someone to advocate for you. It to me kind of represents being a little bit helpless, which maybe that's not the right understanding of advocates. Maybe that's a bias on my part, but naming things a lot of is about kind of understanding cultural bias. Is developer advocate a better name than evangelist? Maybe. Is it a name I'm rushing out to adopt? Well, not yet. I feel like I kind of haven't come up with the perfect job title yet. So let's talk about what evangelists actually do. What do I do as an evangelist? As an evangelist, a lot of what I do has to do with communication between my company and our customers and our potential customers out in the wild. And it's communication that goes both ways. Figuring out what are the difficult things that people are encountering? What are the problems that people really need to solve? How do our products or different techniques related to our products fit in with that? That is a big part of my job. Patterns and practices that can help people be more successful. Now, the two-way communication comes in both in figuring out and really listening to people about what's difficult and what's hard. And in places, where our products could improve, what are, really identifying what are those pain points that not only our existing products help with, but what might we be able to do with them that could really help fit this need? And channeling communication back to our development teams and saying, hey, here's what I'm hearing from our customers. I actually get asked by our development teams a ton. What are you hearing from people in the marketplace? What are you hearing from consultants? What are you hearing from potential customers? What are you hearing from people at conferences? Because they really want to know what are the places and opportunities we really have, what's working well with people, what could we do better at. Now, the same thing happens when listening to people's difficult things. We're having a problem with X. We want to get better at X. The job of an evangelist is not only to understand, okay, there's a product that could help you out. The job of an evangelist is also to understand patterns about how people work. If we are going to apply a technology or a product or a process, what are the things that will actually make a team successful at that? What are the ways that people interact that needs to change? And what are the dependencies on really making this work well? The idea isn't just to sell the products. And in a lot of my talks, I'm going to talk about things where, yeah, our products can make it easier, but there's always a bunch of different ways to do things. So when I design talks, I'm actually interested in thinking about just what are the ways to make people successful? Yes, if our products fit into this, that's amazing. And I do have a bias because I do have an employer, right? And I want to be clear about that all the time. Evangelists aren't unbiased and neutral, but we're also part of the job is also to be quite open and to not only think about the products, but to also think about how people work and how people can be successful, even if parts of that are outside of the products, or even if our products aren't required to make you successful. Because the truth about the modern world and technology is you can absolutely write a bunch of code yourself to do a lot of things. Is it going to take you a long time? Yes, right? There's always more than one way to do something. Buying products from different vendors can make your life easier. So to me, the point of being an evangelist is really about helping people get set up to succeed. And, the parts I'm going to be the best at, the parts I'm going to look at the most are in the areas around where my company and where our focus is. Because, in fact, I am really passionate about that. I took an evangelist job at a place where I was passionate about what we were doing. I wouldn't have taken an evangelist job if I didn't think these were important problems to solve and if I didn't think they were good tools to solve the problems, for example, right? So I think, it's really hard to say this in a nutshell, but I think an evangelist is someone who helps people be successful with the technology from that company, but further help set people up for making an informed decision about how they can be successful. And what this ends up meaning is evangelists may be useful to you even if you're not customers of that company's products, because I think when it comes to a good evangelist, they're giving you information that, yeah, it's going to really help you if you use that company's products, but they're also giving you really valuable information that's going to have implications agnostic of what products you're using, right? So for me, I want to deliver value and insights about DevOps. However you're doing DevOps, I want it to be valuable to you. I would love it if you would use our products, but even if you aren't, in everything I do, I want there to be takeaways that are valuable. Even if you're not doing DevOps right now, keeping it in the possible things you might do, but even if you are doing DevOps now, things you can work in regardless of the product that you're using. Now, An interesting thing about my job is my job personally is not a quote unquote pure evangelist job. I don't know if there is such a thing as a pure evangelist job, but my job at Redgate, the job advertisement, this isn't a secret, the job advertisement itself said up to 40% of your time is going to be spent working with the sales folks as part of the sales process, but not as a salesperson, as an evangelist. And this might sound kind of weird because I have said, hey, part of evangelism is being a bit agnostic of the products themselves and about talking about how to be successful in ways that are meaningful even if you aren't using the products. That's still true. The interesting thing I think about sales, and I think this is an evolution of the sales process, is more and more companies need to really tap into insights about the customer and really understanding the customer's products. More and more companies are turning to different models of purchase, different subscription models, right? More and more people don't want to sell you something you buy once. They want to buy something that you renew. Renewal is incredibly important to software companies. The point in sales is not just to sell a product once. You need your customers to use your products and to become successful at it because you want them to continue happily using your product in the future. That is a huge important thing. So really understanding where the customer is coming from, what their problems are, and how to solve those problems is a very, very important part of the sales process. And that is really become my absolute favorite part of my job, is interacting with new and renewing customers as part of the sales process. Because when you interact with potential customers and existing customers, you learn about all these different real world scenarios. And I think the value that I provide to Redgate as an evangelist is that, I've been a database person for 20 years, right? A long, long time. I've been working with how to write code, how to optimize SQL servers, how to optimize processes, and I'm always learning more. So in terms of my experience, it helps me really understand where customers are coming from when they're struggling with how do we safely deliver database changes at a high rate? How do we do this without overworking our people so that they're dragging in the next morning and aren't even awake enough to do code review, right? How do we optimize this process and make happy teams that work well, that have stable systems, and we have everything humming perfectly so we can really churn changes through? That's not easy. But my job as an evangelist is to kind of have insights into, okay, how do we safely make these changes? And working with different customers, I mean, to me, it resonates with so many different experiences I've had. Every software development group is unique. Everyone has their own problems, and everybody has a certain amount of anti-patterns that work for us, right? Like the job isn't just, hey, there's these best practices and you're going to find it. It's much more of figuring out how do we come up with unique ways to solve these problems and get to the result we want. And, probably we're going to follow a lot of best practices, but probably we can't just implement all these best practices anywhere because there's always unique requirements and unique factors to different businesses that mean not every best practice fits. So a lot of what I do is I get to listen for what are the really important requirements and how do we map best practices to this? How do we creatively come up with solutions to the places where the best practices don't match? And that kind of helps us picture the future state. Then there's the further problem of how do we get from here to the desired future state? Often we can't do it all in one go. Often we may have to, take smaller steps to get there. But working with customers in the sales process, I have found that it's really just like the secret to making evangelism exciting for me, because I get to hear from customers about real problems and I get to help brainstorm creatively to come up with solutions for those and help unstick people from getting blocked. And to me, that is just a ton of fun. Now, I do think that the culture of the sales team you're working with matters. I don't think that every sales, I mean, I've worked with different sales teams throughout my career, and I'm not going to name any names here, but I have worked as some sales teams well in the past. I'm not talking about now at Redgate. I have worked with some sales teams who tend to overpromise. They maybe they're promising vaporware, right? They're selling things that don't quite exist. Being an evangelist in that context would be deeply uncomfortable and probably wouldn't work, because a big part of being an evangelist is being straightforward with people, being honest, and having credibility, right? I can't sell vaporware. I'm not going to sell vaporware. And working in a culture where that happens, that would be a hard fit. So I think more and more with software, because of the importance of renewals, because of the importance with cultural happiness, I think those practices in other places, I don't think they're going to survive and thrive. I think more and more sales processes are going to need to become more transparent to be successful. Otherwise, later on, people are going to be looking at those deals and they're going to say, why didn't this customer renew? Well, if we sell them something that doesn't exist, if we sell them something that doesn't work for them, that customer is probably not going to end up being super satisfied. So I have been thriving as being part of this process, but I think it is, if you're looking at different evangelists in different companies, their health and their ability to thrive is going to depend on part of the process they're in. I think evangelist jobs are great. It's definitely a specific personality type. You have to like to talk. You have to like to listen. You have to like to interact with people as well as create presentations and things like that. But if you are a person who is interested in teaching and in learning, it can be a fantastic fit. My job does technically sit within a marketing department. I think that's great. In the past, we may have thought of marketing, and in the long past, I thought of marketing this way as being kind of just a department that put out a good image. We need to make things look good. More and more that is changing, and more with the business changes that are happening inside companies, with digital transformations that get talked about at the executive level. The role of marketing is about helping the company have insight into the customer. What is the customer saying? What is the customer doing? What resonates with the customer? What excites the customer? What frustrates the customer and your potential customers? These insights are incredibly critical to helping a company survive, both in terms of the messages you're giving to people, because you want to help people understand that you can solve their biggest pains when you can solve the biggest pains, but also in terms of shaping the product design. Customers can easily compare and easily switch service providers more quickly than ever using phones and computers. People have choice, and we have more and more interesting ways of delivering messages to people too. And I think evangelists are a really important part of that. And that has to do both with reaching people through things like podcasts, through things like Twitch, through trying out new communication methods, but also in terms of listening to the customers. I get inputs from customers in Slack channels, the SQL Server community Slack channel. I hear things sometimes. I get them by email. I get them by messages on my website. I also get them through that contact with customers. And the great thing about that is that I can learn in depth in those experiences about, okay, what are the problems that you're facing? What are the real pains you have? And what's really important to you? And what is the best plan to get there? Does our company's products fit in that plan? Sometimes they will. Sometimes they won't, right? And the success of marketing and the success of sales is really finding places where it really works, right? Because those are going to be the customers that not only buy, but the customers that renew, the customers that tell other customers, hey, we found a great way to solve these products using those solutions. So have I found a short answer to what an evangelist does that I could say at Passport Control? Well, to be honest, at Passport Control, I think it's just easier to say that I am a software developer. I've decided that when it comes to Passport Control, I mean, we can all describe our jobs in different ways, right? And I do write some code, right? I do write some products for people. So either a sales engineer, which really my job is not a sales engineer, but a related job title is a little bit easier to explain. And I think that it represents the job as best it can in that form, because for better or for worse, the term evangelist is just really heavily loaded. And if you have ideas about the best possible job title for an evangelist, I would love to hear it, because I still haven't come up with that perfect term yet. I like the term developer advocate, but I'm just still not 100% sold that it's the best way to describe the job. So anyhow, for all of those of you who've been asking, hey, Kendra, what is it that you've been doing these days? It's a little bit about my job as an evangelist. And I've got some more episodes in the queue coming up. I've got some more questions to answer. Looking forward to talking to you folks again soon and making Dear SQL DBA a more regular thing. Thanks, folks.